Ever wondered about medieval wine poetry? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be discussing on this 180th episode of The Jewish Drinking Show, bringing L'chaim to life. Welcome, everybody, to the 180th episode of The Jewish Drinking Show. I'm your host, Rabbi Drew Kaplan, and we are joined by Professor Ronnie Perelis. Welcome, Professor Perelis.
It's great to be here. A lot of fun. I'm looking forward.
Awesome. All right. For those less familiar with Professor Perelis, he is the Chief Rabbi Dr. Isaac Abraham and Jelena, Rachel Alcalay, Associate Professor of Sephardic Studies at Yeshiva University, and the Director of the Rabbi Arthur Schneier Program for International Affairs. Professor Perelis has taught the history of the Jews of Spain and their diasporas in academic and popular settings throughout the world. His research investigates connections between Iberian and Jewish culture during the medieval and early modern periods. His essays in Sephardic history analyze the dynamics of religious transformation within the context of the crypto-Jewish experience. His book, Narratives from the Sephardic Atlantic, Blood and Faith, explores family identity in the Sephardic Atlantic world. Professor Perelis was awarded an NEH grant for his project, Translating the Americas Together with Professor Flor Casson. As part of this project, he will prepare a critical edition, English translation, and historical study of the rediscovered manuscripts of Louis de Carvajal, a 16th century Mexican crypto-Jewish thinker. Our conversation is taking place also roughly within that time period. Yes-ish?
Earlier.
Even earlier than your current research projects, but as it is. Okay. I'm curious to hear from you about medieval Jewish wine poetry. Wine special.
Wine special. Great.
Yeah.
It's really great to be here. I've enjoyed the show for a while. And I love the sort of worlds that you bring together and the variety of guests and perspectives. I always learn something. And so thank you. Thank
Amazing.
you. And really fun to be here.
Very exciting.
So you saw from as you focused on my bio, my research and my writing really is in the 16th, 17th century. I focus a lot on Inquisition and Jews creating space for themselves in very difficult circumstances. But my teaching, a lot of my teaching deals with the classical period of Sephardic Jewish history, which is the medieval period, Jews living in Sfarad, and with particular focus on life in the early part of the medieval period, mostly in the Muslim context of medieval Spain. And that allows me or encourages me or forces me to some extent to spend a lot of time with poetry because, one of the great innovations of Jewish culture at that time was this revolution that took place in the world of Hebrew poetry, both in the world of Shirei Kodesh, so sacred poetry, piyutim, as most people are familiar with. So poetry that was destined for liturgy, that would be part of your Shabbat tefillah or a holiday tefillah, or like what's coming up. I mean, I don't know when this is going to get released, but we're speaking
the end of August. Okay,
so we're speaking now. On the eve of Tisha B'av is on the way up.
Otherwise, we would be drinking wine tonight, but there's no wine here.
Yes, sadly, no wine. Yes, and the keynote, these are piyutim, right? These are poems that were written. Those are sad poems. They're hard poems. They're mourning poems that were written over the course of many generations, different time periods, different places, and that eventually became part of what we do. What if you keep Tisha B'av in a communal setting? You sit on the floor and you read keynote, right? But the poetic tradition in Judaism is very, very deep. It goes back to the Bible. We have the great Paitanim, like the great poets like Yanai and Kalir that were working after the destruction of the temple, and that make their way in a very big way into Ashkenazi liturgy, especially for the high holidays and slichot and penitence time. But I teach a period of time when there is a revolution of Jewish thinking about language, about linguistics, about the nature of the relationship to the world of Torah, and this explosion of thinking that happens in the early medieval period, starting with the end of the Gaonim. So think about like the end of like Saadia Gaon, which is 10th century, and then just kind of explodes in Spain, which is this crossroads place. And people start rethinking what they're doing with their poetry. And not only do they rethink the poetry they're creating for prayer on a Shabbat, in the synagogue context, something we don't really appreciate. But back then, every Shabbat or every special Shabbat, let's say the Shabbat before Pesach, Shabbat before Purim, or something like that, it's expected that the Chazan would get up and have a new piyut for a certain part of tefillah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not just, do you have a nice tune for Lecha Dodi? No, we're expecting you to write something like Lecha Dodi, right? So this is a period of tremendous creativity. But it's at this time in the 10th century when you have a change. And for other classes, we can talk about where the change happened and where it came from. But there's a change in the religious poetry, in other words, the poetry that's for tefillah, but also something else. They start writing poems that aren't for the synagogue. People get together and they write Hebrew poetry. Now, no one is speaking Hebrew, right? There's no speaking Hebrew in the street. People are speaking Arabic. They're speaking Proto-Spanish. They're speaking all these different languages. But Hebrew is their written language. It's their holy language. It's the language of tefillah. It's the language of Jewish creativity, but it's not a spoken language. And yet you start to see people treating it as something to use to describe their everyday experience. So a sunset, loss of a friend, a joke, whatever it may be, let's do it in Hebrew. We can do it in Hebrew. And so wine becomes a very favored topic of these gentlemen who get together at night, generally with a bowl of wine and poetry, extemporaneous poetry. So that's kind of
this is maybe it feels foreign to me as an Ashkenazi.
No.
As an Ashkenazi. This is just in the Iberian context. It's not taking place elsewhere in the continent of Europe, correct?
Right. So the trend of writing poetry that's not for liturgy, that's not for tefillah, starts only happening in Spain. And it spreads, but it doesn't spread north. It only spreads back into the Islamic world through the Mediterranean.
The Maghreb. Yeah.
Yeah, and into Italy. Italy, it does. It does.
Okay.
Yes. In fact, Italy has a lot of very interesting, very fun, sometimes from the point of view of rabbis, very problematic Hebrew poetry being written. So like
a little too body, a little
yes. So like Emmanuel of Rome was a poet, and he makes it into the Shulchan Aruch, not for a good reason. He makes it to Shulchan Aruch because Yosef Karo says you definitely shouldn't read him on Shabbos. In fact, you should never read him.
An ignominious reference.
Yeah. So yeah. But exactly, it is not something you're seeing in Ashkenaz. There are Paitanim in Ashkenaz that absorb the style, but they're only going to use it for religious poetry. They're not writing it. They're not using it to describe, a beautiful tree that they see, or to write a philosophical. There's like philosophical poems talking about meditating on the soul, meditating on death, and that is something you're only seeing in Spain. They're known to be masters of this, and other people imitate them elsewhere, but Spain is the greatest place for that.
You say Spain. Is it okay to say Iberian Peninsula?
Iberian Peninsula is more accurate.
Oh, okay, great.
More accurate, because this was right. There's no Spain at the time.
Okay.
As we know it as a separate country. There are a lot of different kingdoms. In the north, it's mostly Christian, and they speak a variety of Latin-based languages, with the exception of the Basques, who speak Basque, and that's not to do with anything. It's from Mars. But and then in the south, the Muslims come in 711. They take over most of the peninsula.
Yeah.
By the 11th century, they've already been they're really just in the south. But that's where the greatest Jewish communities are for a very long time. Like Cordoba, the city of Lucena, which is a city all Jewish, and had yeshiva. It's where the Rif was
Oh, wow.
teacher. Yeah, I mean, so you had these major individuals: Shlomo ben Gabirol, Shmuel Nagid, Moshe ben Ezra. These are people. Yehuda Levi is from the north, but he knows if he wants to make it, he has to go to the south. You don't stay in the Christian north. That's considered that was backward. That was very limited.
Oh, really? It was a lot more creative in the Muslim South.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you had this mix. You had Jews, you had Christians, you had Muslims, a big mix. You had a lot coming through. There was a lot of so there was books that were coming from the East coming to Spain, being translated, and the Jews were part of all that.
And just for historical context, you mentioned 10th century. Until when? Is it really until expulsion? Till late 14th century, late 15th century? How long does this extend?
The flowering goes like the really most creative poets, the ones that become almost canonical a little bit, are people, say Shmuel Nagid, who lived in Granada. Amazing figure. He rose to become the vizier, basically second in command of the kingdom. He was a general. He led troops out to war. Wow. He writes about that in his poetry. And he was a great Talmid Chacham and a supporter of the Jews and everything else. And
that's a rare mix.
Yes, crazy mix. I mean, I'm telling you, he's amazing. Moshe ben Ezra, also from Granada. Shlomo ibn Gabirol, who moved around a lot. He had a difficult itinerant life. And Halevi kind of ends it. Halevi's 12th century, and afterwards there are great poets. There's Al-Harizi, there's Abulafia, there are great poets, but there's something very unique about that earlier period because everything changes, and then it becomes a little bit more like they're the canonical and people are imitating them, or they're going in very different new directions. But it continues till today. Like in the Sephardic world, there are people writing piyutim today. I mean, look, you could say it's much more popular, but someone like Yishai Ribo, right?
Yeah.
What does he do? What is he writing? He's taking his experience of being in a Sephardic Beit Knesset and being inundated with Shir Shirim every Friday evening.
And wine's right there at the beginning.
Wine, love, everything. Ritzufa Hava. Where do you think he got that from? Right? I mean, it's just like, and the piyutim taught him what to do. You do shibutz. You take a phrase here. You take a phrase there. You do it. You do something you wouldn't think connects. And what he does is he just adds all this fun,
contemporary
kind of pop music and the pop thing. But he's a great example. But it's something that within the Sephardic culture, where you have much more care about dikduk, about grammar, about pronunciation, respect for the language, is very, very important. And that has continued, that has maintained itself, even with all of the changes in Sephardic Torah culture that have happened. And you still have that as very, very strong. That's the basis for being able to write, and also the musicality is very important. If you go to Sephardic synagogue, one of the things that pops out to you is, wow, this is much more musical. Even the simple things are more musical, and it's communal. Everyone's, people are involved. And anyways, so, but really the after Halevi, there's a change, I would say. I think it's not as this thing less revolutionary, but like, I mean, I'll show you a book that I use all the time. This is what I teach from. It's called The Dream of the Poem. By Peter Cole. Peter Cole is a wonderful poet and translator and scholar. And this book goes till 1492. And you can follow the trend of Hebrew poetry to Italy, like I said. But, throughout we have piyutim. Often they're... so publishing kind of stopped people from thinking they could just add things.
What do you, at least in your opinion, what do you think were the cultural conditions that led to that, especially even the difference between being in the southern part of the Iberian Peninsula versus the northern at the same time. So what were the cultural conditions that really led to the flourishing of this type of content?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one of the great questions. A lot of things had to happen, right? You had to have a lot of things. There was this very deep interest again in Hebrew linguistics, in understanding the words. So you think about the Pshat revolution in Parshanut, people like
Rashbam,
Ibn Ezra, but
Ibn Ezra,
right. If you look at Rashi, Rashi's quoting people like
Baruch,
the Aruch. He's quoting Menachem ben Saruk, who was a grammarian who lived in Cordoba. He's quoting his great rival. There were rivals, right?
Oh,
Dunash ben Labrat. Dunash ben Labrat studied in Baghdad with Sadia and absorbed many new ideas about grammar, mostly coming from Arabic, because they're related languages. And as the Muslims developed a more sophisticated understanding of Arabic, he was able to absorb that and apply it to Hebrew linguistics. And he brings that to Spain because after he studies with Sadia, he gets patronage from Chazai ben Shaprut, who was a great statesman and courtier and physician, rabbi living in Cordoba. And so Chazai supports him to do his thing. And it's with Dunash that you start to see this flowering. But a lot of it had to do with a certain Kinat Sofrim, jealousy of the authors.
Like competition,
but with the Muslims. Because
really?
One theory is that the Muslims had this idea that Arabic was the most beautiful language. There's no more beautiful language than Arabic, and that's why God revealed the Quran in Arabic. And so and part of the proof was look how great Arabic poetry is. Right now, the Arabs, before they became Muslim, had a very rich oral poetic tradition. And after Islam, it wasn't forgotten, even though it was criticized and some people were against it and some people were for it, whatever, but it was there. And so in the Arabic culture, you have obviously the Quran and the study of the Quran, but then you have this whole other sphere where Arabic is this language of beauty, language of science and philosophy and all these other things. Jews are involved in all of that. They've mastered Arabic. They're translators and they know about the poetry because it's every. If you work at the king's court, you will hear poets constantly doing things. And there's a sense among some of the Jewish intellectuals is, well, they think their language is so great. We can do everything with Hebrew. Hebrew is what God created the world with. Hebrew is the ancient language. We can do everything they can do. We can do it with Hebrew.
Yeah.
And that is part of the stimulus for this idea. So, and there's a copying, right? They see what's going on in the king's court, how people sit around and they sing poetry and they have these parties. They come back together as Jews, Jewish culture, in the privacy of their gardens, and they have their own poetic culture that creates it. And so there's a symbiosis that's happening, and it's kind of a healthy antagonism as well.
I have to ask at this point.
Yeah.
So there's a great deal of similarity. One very clear and central dissimilarity, however, for a Muslim situation is the drinking aspect. So how did I mean, I don't, like thinking about this cultural piece of it, like when the Jews were like very explicitly employing the wine piece into their poetry, into their singing, and probably also into their gatherings, how much were they conscientious of this? Like, this is something that we do that they're not doing. Also, their wine poetry doesn't exist. They're not going to compete with our wine or drinking poetry. Right.
So in the Islamic context, wine poetry starts to become very difficult and very weird. It's a pre-existing it's a pre-Islamic Arabic tradition of wine poetry. So some
Really?
people, yeah, because before Islam, they drank wine.
So how do they have to thread that needle?
So some of them would say, "Oh, it's a metaphor. Wine, knowledge of God. It's this mystical sort of thing." You have that.
Uh-huh.
Other people in Spain, it was known the Muslims drank wine, and the clerics would get upset, and the people would do what they did because they're in Spain and it's different. And then every once in a while, there'd be trends of more puritanical Islam that comes in and stops it. So
So
but
you're saying it's a geographical context difference? Like if they were in Egypt, if they're in Saudi Arabia, like it'd be.
Yeah, they're kind of far. Also, I think the fact that they're surrounded by Christians who do drink wine and the Jewish minority that also drinks wine.
Yeah.
It's also things were more fluid, at least for most of the history there. It's very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of things the poetry talks about that you're not supposed to do. Right? There's a lot of homoerotic poetry. There's a lot of heterosexual poetry, right? Heteroerotic poetry, which also like that's not appropriate for any religious person.
Certainly not in public contexts. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So it becomes there seems to be a gap between what you do in a private setting and what you do in public, and there's an understanding, and there's there wasn't remember there was no Instagram, no one was posting, oh, you wouldn't believe the poem this guy wrote tonight, said tonight. So things could stay in a more, but it doesn't mean people were totally at peace with it. There was an anxiousness, and there was a desire to, often people later in life would regret their secular poems. And one of the things about the secular term is it's important to know there are secular poems which feel far from religion or playing with religion or a little bit antagonistic. But so many of them are deeply religious, deeply spiritual, deeply, and they just, the author didn't mean them for synagogue use. And so, when you write a poem about the death of your brother, it just because it's not, it's still, it's whole. It's a shirei chol, but it's not. So it's one of those things. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is one, but this is also, I just want to say, like, this is not like a settled issue. Like scholars are constantly kind of trying to understand it, and there's new theories that come up, and it's also very contextual.
Hey there, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. If you like poetry and drinking, well, stay tuned for next week. I'm going to give you a sneak peek into next week's episode on Yiddish drinking songs featuring Rachel Kafferson. Here we go.
Okay. So
I'm not going to lie. I like the second one better, but I love the party atmosphere of the first one. That was fun. And there were a few drinks in, so it's even better.
Yes, it's such great atmosphere. And you could hear them kind of like arguing a little bit about like what the lyrics are. And the lyrics are like 5 words.
I hope you enjoyed that sneak peek into next week's episode featuring Rachel Kafferson on Yiddish drinking songs. And now back into this episode featuring Professor Ronnie Perelis.
I like to start with this poem because it is a poem that encapsulates the anxiety of Aladis, but also the beauty. And this comes from Dunash, who I talked about. Dunash was this grammarian who spent time in Babylonia with Saadia Gaon, the great polymath, true polymath of the early medieval period, legal scholar, philosopher, political maneuverer, was the first one to write discrete monographs on halakhic issues that then became like a very popular thing to do. They're really fascinating, and one of the great luminaries, Dunash, who you're familiar with from things like from Rashi and from Torah Yikra. He wrote that, right? So,
whoa,
yeah.
That's big.
Yeah, exactly. We'll start with this image here. This is from the Alhambra Palace in Granada. This is the sort of place. I mean, this is incredibly grand, but this is, imagine You're in an enclosed courtyard,
Mm-hmm.
right? The houses were built around courtyards with fountains. It provides shade, it provides cooling and cross breezes, and protection, right? And protection from the outside world, protection from people you don't want to show up. You can kind of, so this is where you would have an intimate evening, and in a beautiful setting. And this is Dunash's poem.
Mm-hmm.
I have the English.
Wine's in the first line.
Yes.
Stay young, yashan. Drink old wine. Aged wine.
Gomer al tishan shtei yain yashan.
Don't sleep. Stay up to drink this old wine.
Exactly. He said, Ve'omer, he said, don't sleep. Right. Let's drink old wine.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes on to kind of tempt this guy to stay. This is Peter Cole's great translation. Drink, he said, don't drowse. Drink wine aged well in barrels, near henna beds and aloes and roses mixed with myrrh, in pomegranate groves by grapevines and date palms, with tender plants and saplings and tamarisk and rose. To the sound of coursing water, the thrumming of the cithar accompanies the singers with reed pipes and an oud. How's that sound so far?
If there's a lot of sounds and smells and sights and
right. Yeah. I mean, look at the fruits that he talks about. These are sacred fruits: pomegranate, grapes, dates, tamarim, and then we start hearing things: sound of the water that's going through the garden, the music, all the trees spread with branches and fine fruit, and every sort of bird sings among the leaves. Pigeons coo and moan as though composing songs, and turtle doves respond as though they're playing flutes.
And here we get with drinking again.
Yes. And I just want to say this.
Oh, there's drinking again.
Yes, of course. We're going to get to it in a second. But
okay, fine.
But I want you to hear this in Hebrew. Look what he does with the sounds. The regesh tzinorim vehemyat kinorim alei peh hasharim beminim v'navilim.
It's rhyming. It's rhyming.
V'sham kol eitz munaf yafe pri anaf v'tzikor kol kanaf yeranen ben alim. The sense of the flittering, the leaves, you're trying to get like an onomatopoeia going of sorts. So he's setting up the scene, and he's saying, "Oh, we're to drink along the bed." Such about
thank you. There was a long setup for the drinking piece.
Shoshana Sogim, which has in Chazal has a lot of ideas about tzniut, actually, right?
The hedged about by lilies. Yeah, that's a neat reference. Right? Yeah.
And drive away our sorrows with wine and songs of praise. We'll eat the sweet morsels, sip from studded bowls. That was the way that they would drink, would be communally, a big bowl, big glass bowl would be passed around.
Right, you have this here and act as though we're giants drinking from their casks.
Who are the giants?
I don't know.
They're not such good people. Right? They're like Nephilim. They're the people who, they're like, or like they're Goliath. I mean, giants are never like friendly. Like they're,
not enough. But it does say act as though, so it's obviously referencing them. But there's like this.
Yeah, if you drink
maybe
enough,
the wine seems to be small in comparison to us.
This is the response. Silence. How could you propose this? Temple and God's footstool are held by unclean hands. You're speaking like a fool who chose the path of sloth. And what you say is vain, the talk of a buffoon. You've left your meditation on the law of heaven. You'd celebrate why jackals roam on Zion's hill. This is good for our week.
Yeah.
How can we drink wine or even raise our eyes while we now are nothing and detested and despised? You get both sides. He gets the last word, the naysayer, the rebuker.
First of all, I just want to say I love what you pointed out with the Hebrew, the rhyming, but also like the tempo and the rhythm. I wonder how much of that is being influenced by the Arabic and sort of the smooth flowingness of that.
Yes.
So
much of it is. They're copying Arabic models.
Okay.
And structures.
Yeah.
The
The other thing is, it does make me wonder about the it's nice to talk about the intellectual flourishing or even this creative cultural flourishing, but it makes me also think about the material flourishing. Like clearly I can't help but get a sense, even if it's not overt, that they it was comfortable. Like the material environment was good for them.
Cole, in the great introduction here to his book, he points this out. This is a literature that is born out of people who have extra time. And these are people with tremendous education, right? Yeah. That they can, we know that they would have evenings where they said, okay, all the poems tonight, there's no chet in the poem. You can't have a chet, the letter chet in the poem. High level of education, their grasp of Tanakh in particular is very, very deep, but also allusions to Midrashim and Agadot and everything else. Many of them are deeply philosophical and, have a lot of scientific knowledge as well that gets blended in, talking about the stars, talking about the soul. I mean, things like that, it flows into. Yes, there's a lot of the luxury to dream and to imagine and to build and be creative.
Hello, dear listeners. It's your host, Rabbi Drew. I wanted to break in right now and just say, hey, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate, or watching, however you're consuming this content. And I'm always open for new ideas, both for specifically the Jewish Drinking Show, whether it's topics, whether it's guests. I'm also looking for other resources that I can provide you with in the Jewish Drinking Project more broadly. Also, I'd really like to offer you the opportunity to sponsor this work. Whether if you want to go to patreon.com/Jewish Drinking, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you have ideas for swag, also, please feel free to send them to me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. All right, thank you so much, L'chaim, and now back into the episode.
Dunash was at the behest of a very rich person. He himself had nothing, right? Nice. If it wasn't for Chazdai, you wouldn't have this space. But there were enough people like Chazdai around to support someone like him, right? And a culture like that. So this is Moshe Ibn Ezra.
Oh, okay.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of people, Ibn Ezra, they think the Ibn Ezra, as people say in the learning world.
Yeah.
They're seemingly not related.
Not even brothers or cousins or
no.
whatever?
I mean, that seems to be the situation. Also, Moshe Ibn Ezra is a little bit earlier. Moshe Ibn Ezra is often not known so much about because he didn't write on halakha and he didn't write like a big book of philosophy, but he was an amazing poet in the Sephardic tradition. A lot of the slichot are his. I don't know, the very famous El Nora Alila that comes at the end of Ne'ilah, which I'll spare your listeners. I won't sing it, but you should look it up. El Nora Alila, Himtzi Lanu Mechila B'Shata Ne'ilah. So that's him. And he also wrote the first book and the most important book writing about Hebrew poetry.
Oh, wow.
He gives like lives of the poets and he has theories about the poetry and he has, and he lived in Granada from a good family. Later in life comes on hard times, but this is an earlier poem. And again, this is Peter Cole's translation. I'll read the Hebrew because it's kind of short. Vehishkamnu halumei yein yedidot ve'ein banu lihithalech yecholet. Alechar nafchu ruchei besamav veherichu kekida o shachelet. Veshemesh rakma panav betzitzim ve'alav parsu beged techelet.
I love the opening.
What's going on? Right?
I don't know if it's like they're still at the same place where this happened. Whoa, we're waking up from oh my goodness. I was on this couch.
Yeah. Right? Now, notice Hishkamnu.
Everybody was on these couches.
Not drunk in the corner alone.
Right.
Miserable. He's with friends. And where was he coming? He says party. And in general, I totally defer to Cole, but I don't like it because yain yedidot, wine of friendship, right? And friendship is so important to these men. It's a wine party, but it's not wine that's just for the party. It's wine that builds friendship, and it's wine that's enjoyed with camaraderie and with friendship. And this is a theme that goes throughout the secular poetry: the importance of friends. People writing to each other, people men expressing how much they miss each other. It's been a long time. I'm sending you a letter because I can't see you. These sorts of things. And the importance of friendship, of being there for each other, sociality. And again, that comes from luxury. That comes from having the time and the money
to be able to share
right?
wine together.
Yeah. And to just bring in another piece of reality, it's a very gendered world, right? This is all only men. Only men are getting together. There are no women involved. This is a man's world. This is a world of, and it's a class, it's very class dependent as well. This is someone who is going to write all sorts of poems. He's going to write beautiful elegies for people close to him, people who died. He's going to write beautiful slichot that are still said today. He's also going to write erotic poetry that he was embarrassed by later. That he had reports that he would ask people, if you find my earlier poetry, burn it.
Wow. Did any of that earlier poetry in which he mentioned the more ribald aspects interplay also with the wine or the drinking?
It definitely did. Because wine is a symbol of things. It's often a euphemism for kissing. Let me drink the wine from your lips, which is Shir Shirim has that.
Yeah, right? So there's an interplay of romance and sexual love and also drinking.
Yes, and sensuality.
Specifically wine.
Yeah, wine in particular.
Wow.
They don't talk about drinking too many other things.
Yeah.
Wine seems to be the main thing they drink. They talk about its color. There's beautiful poems about the light coming through the glass bowl and how it changes the color. They mostly drink red wine. I don't know if it was mixed or not. I don't know enough of the technicalities.
But they largely drank, as we saw in the previous poem, from bowls, like shared bowls to drink from.
That's my understanding. They seem to be, and they pass them around. There's a beautiful Hanagid poem talking about a bunch of people drinking and that they pass the bowl of wine around like a gem, like a ruby or something. This comes from when he wrote it. His name was Shlomo Halevi. He was a very important Jewish communal leader, a courtier. He was an advisor to the king. He was a diplomat. He did a lot of things. Very learned, great rabbi. Later in his life, when he's about 40 or so, 45, 50, he has a crisis of faith and converts to Christianity and becomes a bishop, and he gets the name of Pablo de Santa Maria. So he goes from Shlomo Halevi to Pablo de Santa Maria, Paul of St. Mary, and his son becomes a bishop also, and he becomes a real enemy to the Jewish people. He wrote a lot of polemical works using his Torah knowledge, and difficult, very important figure in Spanish Jewish history and in Spanish history. He was a Jew, and he was serving the Christian king. And he's on a diplomatic mission, and they get stuck for a very long time. It was supposed to be a short trip. It turned out to be weeks, and he misses Purim. And so
he already Christianized.
No, he's still Jewish.
Oh, he's still okay.
He's still Jewish. He's still Shlomo Halevi. He's still a Jew. In fact, you'll see from the poem, a very religious Jew, very careful Jew. And that's one thing that people always said about him. His students didn't understand. He said, "You were always so pious. You're always careful about every halakha. You're. How could this be?" So this is fitting way to kind of end in these days. This difficult, it's a difficult poem. Cole calls the poem "Memories Wine." I'll read it. These are days when gifts should be given and delight in the cup's color taken. But friends and favors are far from me now. There are no poor, and I'm alone. Remember, it's Purim.
Oh, you can't do Matana Levionim.
He says, so first of all, right, no
gifts to the poor.
No gifts. I'm not going to enjoy the wine. I don't have anyone to be here. Friends are far. There are no poor. I can't give Matana Levionim.
Right.
Instead, in place of these mitzvot, I find consolation. If only I could meet my companion, for there has never been one like him, ever since the world began. Because of his absence, the flood flowed forth in the time of Enosh and Tubal Cain, and if not for Noah's legacy to us, Noah who planted the vine, Fear of another would still plague man. Today, however, I'm on my own, and my soul sighed when I went to the fountain. The party's pleasure and joy have been dimmed. The sun above my feast won't shine. Memory alone can comfort me now, and so from my heart I draw up wine. He doesn't have wine to drink. He's been there for so long. And so it's like my memory and my thinking of you and writing this poem is my Purim. So the Purim, he can't do anything before Purim. He can write the poem and send it to his friend. And that's the best thing he can do for Purim. But sadly, he's someone who things changed. Changed. And, life changed. But this poetry lived on. And that's what's exciting and wonderful. The secular poetry, and this is, I'll just leave with this last idea. There was always back and forth between the secular poems and the devotional poems or the liturgical poems, the Kodesh poems, mostly because it was the same people writing them. So, like I said, Moshe Ibn Ezra is a great example. He writes this fun wine poem. He's also going to write a slicha that's going to break your heart. And so the slichot or the other poems will take images and a lot of ideas and almost strategies from the secular poetry into the holy. And so there's a way that this is one of the hallmarks of the Sephardic poetic tradition, which is it draws you in. It draws you in immediately through the senses and then takes you to the religious, kind of epiphany. So there's that back and forth, which lives on even if people stopped writing to a great extent these kind of secular poems in Hebrew. You see that they keep on writing beautiful, very sensual poems in Hebrew for religious purposes. But that sensuality, which wine is a part of, but it's not only one, is all comes through. Look, why do we sing Shir Shirim Erev Shabbat? Right? Like it's because there's nothing more holy. And yet, if you look at it with secular eyes, you won't see that.
Hey there, I wanted to break in yet again. Although I asked for support in financial ways because it does cost some money to make the hosting happen and other aspects of Jewish drinking happen. So your financial support is definitely appreciated. And don't forget, you can go to jewishdrinking.com/donate. But also, another way of supporting the show and everything that Jewish Drinking does is also to tell your friends, tell your neighbors. If you like this content, if you like this show, maybe people also like it. So feel free to let them know, hey, I have this interesting episode I heard, or a few episodes, or whatever it is, or even a few clips. Feel free to share with your friends. All right. Thank you so much. Now back into the show.
Professor Perelis, this has definitely been insightful, especially considering the contextual forces and all that. Before we wrap up, is there anything you would like to promote?
Yes. Thank you. I generally shamelessly promote, first of all, YU. People should know that the graduate school, Revel, REVEL, is fully online. And you can audit our courses if you're interested, or you can sign up for a master's. And a lot of people do it one course at a time. It's a great program. You can study philosophy, history, Talmud, Bible, Olam Umlo, and it's a wonderful program, and we have students from all over. We do have in-person events in New York, and some people do hybrid classes, but most things are synchronous online. So you should definitely look into that. And just, I love coming to communities and teaching, so I'm happy to travel. And we can explore more of the wine poetry together. But no, I mean, I hope, Rabbi Kaplan, Rabbi Drew, I'm really happy you're doing this and bringing worlds together. And again, I'll just say, as we're on the eve of such a hard day at the end, in the middle of such a hard period in Jewish history. And it's helpful to look backwards. My wife always tells me this, that living with a historian has a few benefits, very few. One of them is that you get perspective. And you've been in hard times and you get through them. And and with Hashem's help, we will get through these hard times. But I think the best way we get through these hard times is by filling our wells back to the past, realizing that we have a lot to learn and bring into our lives. And I personally hope, and this is why I love teaching this in public settings, is that I think people often look at Torah and Judaism in a bifurcated way. It's like the holy's there, and like I want a part of it, but and I think this poetry is a great model. It's not the only model in Judaism, thank God, but it's a model of how to negotiate, how to interact, how to bring all the different parts of who you are together. And it's one of the beautiful things you do on the show. Kiddush clubs is not just for herring and the schnapps. There's something else that's happening there. It's so special and a lot of depth to it. So kol hakavod. And it's been a really fun experience.
Thank you so kindly. All right. And on that note,
all right,
l'chaim.